Episode 4 Training Wheels. Master, Rabineau huffed and puffed, struggling to catch his breath. This is ridiculous!
Nonsense, my boy!
The old mage turned from his perch atop the cart and peered back at Rabineau, who was currently struggling to pull a cart of his own.
This is a very specialized training.
The cart Rabineau pulled, for the most part, was your stereotypical handcart, small in size, as lightweight as a wood cart could be, and it even had cushioned wraps around the hand grips. All in all, it was a pretty nice handcart. What made this little cart into Rabineau's nightmarish struggle of the day was the fact that Linrim had replaced the nice round wheels with wheels that were not round. These nasty wheels had 12 sides, 12 flat sides. Each revolution of the wheel was a jerky stutter-stop of pulling the weight past the fulcrum until the next side smacked onto the ground. At first, the exercise seemed mundane, tame even for Linrem. Yet, as the first and then the second mile crawled by, Rabineau felt the strain of pulling even the lightweight cart for so long. Each jarring smack of the wheel's flat sides hitting the ground sent shock waves up his arms. The cushioned hand grips helped tremendously, but even that didn't stop the blisters that began bubbling up Rabineau's palm. It was around mile 4 that he first experienced a blister popping. At first, he felt the relief of the pressure as it ruptured, gushing fluid between his fingers and coating his palm. And then he felt the horrendous pain of the raw skin beneath being exposed to the jarring of the cart once more. "My blisters have blisters," Rabineau panted. "Please, master, this is torture."
"Whoa, Slippy!"
Linrem pulled back on the reins, slowing the donkey to a stop.
"Whoa now, good girl!"
The sly old mage patted the donkey's rump before dismounting from the wagon and coming to stand before Rabineau.
"What is your complaint, boy?"
Rabineau sighed in frustration. "My complaint," he began sourly, "is you put this ridiculous wheels on this cart, and the stress from pulling this thing is tearing my hands apart." He peeled his hands off of the grips, showing his palms to his master, blisters and raw spots shining in the sunlight.
"Why aren't you wearing gloves?"
Linrim asked sagely. "Gloves?" Rabineau said dully. "You never gave me any gloves."
"Really?"
Linrim came closer and peered into the handcart.
"Looks like there's a pair in the bottom of the cart there."
He regarded his pupil.
"Did you even look?"
"Master," Rabineau whined, "with or without gloves, this cart is wrecking my muscles."
Linrim said, stroking his beard. "I suppose it is time to show you how to use these wheels."
Rabineau only stared at the old man, sure his eccentrics had gone a tad too far.
"These wheels are made of pine,"
Linrim said with a twinkle in his eye.
"Can you tell me why that is significant?"
"Because if it was made of metal, it would be way heavier?"
"A decent guess,"
Linrim bobbled his head a bit.
"but incorrect. Pine is a very special kind of tree for wheel mages. It grows fast and, more often than not, straight. Additionally, pine is incredibly susceptible to will magic."
"What?" Rabineau asked blankly. "How can a tree be sensitive to will magic?"
Linrim scoffed. "Don't be daft, boy. Will magic imbues every aspect of life on this planet. Just because it is a tree and not a human does not mean they cannot be more or less sensitive to it, just as humans are."
"Okay," Rabineau began, utterly confused. "So what does that mean?"
"Now you are asking the right questions, Rabbit."
Linrim beamed.
"It means that pine trees and the wood we gain from them have some pretty spectacular properties. The pine wood that went into the wheels on this cart came from a special grove of pines that I have been tending for centuries."
"You have your own grove of pine trees?" Linrim looked at Rabineau, looking as if the question posed to him was utterly ludicrous.
"That is besides the point, Rabbit. I swear, you go from asking bad questions to good questions to absurd questions. The inside of your brain must be a nightmare.
Fine, Rabineau replied in exasperation, rolling his eyes at the impossible old man. What is so special about the pine in these wheels?
To be fair, the wheels are in the pine. Limrim cackled madly before returning to Sombra as quickly as a blink. I spent quite some time willing the pines in my grove into shapes and sizes that are beyond unnatural for the trees. These wheels came from the same tree, which I convinced to grow in the shape of a wheel.
How does a tree grow in the shape of a wheel?
It doesn't, Limrim replied, unless I convince it to. Then it's really simple.
But, Rabineau whined, how?
You see, Limrim began, trees are not like humans. You and I had a set of instructions for our bodies to follow in order for our human to be created. Those instructions are rigid and cannot be deviated from, else the end product is not viable. In other words, we can't have an arm growing from our stomachs. It just wouldn't work. Trees, however, are far more unrestrained. Their only imperative is to grow towards the sunlight, spreading their branches to soak in the life-giving rays. So, up and out.
That still doesn't answer my question, Master.
Let me finish, Limrim scoffed. I swear, kids these days. Anyways, what was I saying? Ah, yes, up and out. So, if you can find yourself a sapling, preferably one that is fast-growing, as the pines are, you can use your will to convince the trees to grow in spectacular ways, as long as our two imperatives are still met, up and out.
So, Rabineau began flatly, you're saying that you convinced a pine tree to grow into the shape of a wheel?
I can be very persuasive.
He winked at his apprentice. Okay, fine, Rabineau said. You willed the tree to grow into a wheel. How does that information help me now?
Good, Rabbit!
The twinkle back in his eye.
Back to asking the good questions.
You see, he began walking over to one of the wheels and laying a hand on it.
Pine also has an incredible desire to remain. Once you cut the tree down and make boards from its trunks, those boards will remain straight. To bow or bend, they will only go so far before literally breaking apart in resistance. The same is true for these wheels. When I cut the pine down, these wheels were pristine and perfectly round. I had to cut further to make the flat sides on each.
Why would you do that? Rabineau blurted out. Seems to me like the original design of the wheel was pretty damn good.
Limrim smiled wickedly. Because if I didn't cut the sides into the wood, then I wouldn't be able to do this.
He stroked the wood lovingly, and the flat sides of the wheel began ballooning up, nearly making it wholly round once more. Whoa, Rabineau said in awe. That's incredible.
That is what makes this a very specialized training, Rabbit, Limrim continued. Though the wheels yearn to return to their original shape, it will take constant and precise application of your will to maintain the shape. Understand?
Rabineau only stared at his master blankly. Limrim sighed before going on.
You can make the wheels round to ease your own struggles. However, it is not an easy task to pull a cart while convincing the wheels to stay round. If you let your concentration waver,
Limrim waved a hand at the wheel, and the wood sank back into the flat-sided shape.
You lose its shape. But this is also your first application of will magic in motion. Thus far, all of your castings have been static events. All done while meditating so you can be more in sync with your magic. Now, you must apply what you have learned while we travel. Truly, the choice is yours. Either struggle with the flat-sided wheels, which strengthens your physical self, or struggle to keep the wheels round, strengthening your spiritual self. Either way, the old man shrugged and walked back over to his own cart, vaulting into the seat easily and turning to look at his apprentice. Be sure to keep up. Without waiting to see what Rabineau would do, Linram turned back to Slippy and coaxed the donkey back into motion. Rabineau stared after his master for a long moment, trying to decide what to do. It was clear to Rabineau that the crafty old mage had waited this long to explain the true nature of the wheels in order to tire him out. Now that his physical strength was beginning to waver, the thought of making the wheels round was incredibly enticing. But how would he maintain his casting while in motion? For one thing, he wouldn't be able to engage as well unless he pulled the cart one-handed, and that would certainly be a struggle with his body already taxed. That got Rabineau thinking of how his master was able to do a great deal of casting without touching his third eye. Was there a trick to that? There were still castings that the old mage would brush his fingers along his forehead for, but the majority of his magic was done without. Yet, the tenet of will magic was very clear. You needed 3 things in order to cast, one of which was touching your third eye, releasing the magic. How was he supposed to release the magic without making that contact? You're overthinking it. Rabineau started, jumping and yelping before spinning around to stare at the handcart. Eris was now sitting on the cushioned bench, watching Rabineau with an expression that radiated extreme boredom. Where the hell did you come from? The cat regarded Rabineau coolly before she went on. Quite a question to ask a gal, but I suppose you are about that age now. You see, when a mommy cat and a daddy cat love each other very much. You know that's not what I meant, Eris, Rabineau cut in, blood rushing to his face. How long have you been here? Long enough, she said shortly. Were you ever planning on catching up to Lynn? Or were you hoping he wouldn't notice your absence until he came back along this way? Rabineau scowled. I was going to catch up. He paused. I was just trying to figure out how to cast in motion. Oh, I could see that much, Eris shot back. And I'm telling you that you're overthinking it. His scowl deepened. What do you mean? Will magic is subtle and nuanced, boy, Eris said. How many times must Lynn repeat that before it sinks into your thick skull? That's like telling me the sky is blue, Eris, Rabineau snarled. No shit! That does nothing to help me! Eris moved in a blur, going from the seat to the hand grips and back again. She sat there, licking her paw, as if she hadn't moved at all. It wasn't until Rabineau felt the blood dripping from his face that the pain of her strike sank in. Eris had slashed Rabineau across the face, from ear to chin, in one neat, clean cut. Take that as a warning, boy, Eris glared at Rabineau. You will not disrespect the eternal cat. Rabineau dabbed at his bloody jawline with the sleeve of his shirt, wincing at the sharp pain of the shallow cut. He took a deep breath and looked back at Eris. My apologies, Eris. I did not mean to offend. I'm just very frustrated. Do not be so foolish as to think you may take your frustrations out on me simply because I am a cat, she said, yellow eyes locked onto Rabineau. I am far more ancient than any of my kind, and certainly more than you.
I've been present for so many castings of will magic that it changed my very being. And in case it hasn't truly sunk in yet, I too am able to cast Rabbit. Rabineau flinched as if he had been struck again, the truth of her words sinking with the unexplainable abilities the cat exhibited. Oh, was all he could manage in his shock. Eris sighed. If all pupils are this difficult, it is no wonder Lynn took so few. Will you tell me about Eridan? Rabineau blurted out, Eris's words invoking the ravenous curiosity the boy had developed towards the only other apprentice his master had taken. No, came Eris's sharp reply. Focus on the task at hand. Lynn is practically out of view now. Rabineau started and stared after his master, saying that Eris was right. The cart was disappearing quickly over the horizon, a small dust cloud marking its steady progress. Rabineau swore and began pulling the cart, wheels jerking back into a stuttering motion. Eris leapt onto Rabineau's shoulder with a cry of indignation. You could have warned me, you know, she said into his ear. Riding in the cart is extremely unpleasant with how you are pulling it. Then help me fix it, Rabineau said through clenched teeth, the restarting of the cart flaring up his still raw palms. Fine, Eris snapped, and suddenly the wheels were round. Their motion turned into smooth revolutions. Rabineau moaned in relief as the cart became infinitely easier to pull. Thank you, Eris. Don't thank me yet, the cat warned. I'm not going to do this forever. I'm going to teach you how to cast in motion, or you'll be pulling this ridiculous cart by yourself. Okay, Rabineau said. Then please teach me how to cast in motion. Eris purred. We may make a respectable mage out of you yet. Just over an hour later, Rabineau pulled his handcart into the small town of Arthan, the nearest town to Twilight Chateau, and quickly located Slippy, who was tied up next to the larger cart, drinking water from a long trough. Rabineau took a look at the donkey, making sure her needs were seen to before he ventured into the tavern to hopefully find his master. It didn't take long to locate the old man, sitting at the bar and animatedly narrating a story for the gathered patrons.
And then I said to the lass, That's not an eel, that's my trouser snake.
The bar erupted in laughter, men slapping tabletops and knees alike in their shared mirth, adding to the appreciation for the punchline. Several of the men nearest Linrem clapped him on the shoulder amiably as the laughter began to ebb. That was clearly the climax of the show, because the group began breaking up, individuals wandering back to whatever chair or stool they originally occupied. One of the men next to Linrem saw Rabineau slowly approaching the bar and nudged the old man, nodding in the boy's direction. Linrem turned and smiled broadly as he greeted his apprentice.
Ah, I see you finally made it to town, Not too exhausted, I hope?
No, master, Rabineau answered. Eris showed up just after you left and helped.
Of course she did.
Linrem rolled his eyes. Now that she's awake again, she's going to be the biggest nuisance I've ever...
Ow!
Eris had appeared, perched on Linrem's shoulder, and had dug in what looked like all of her claws into Linrem's flesh. Oh, Lynn, she purred into his ear. I know you weren't about to insult the Eternal Cat. No, were you?
Oh, no, Eris, Linrem said through gritted teeth. I wouldn't dream of insulting you, my dear.
Oh, good, she said without releasing her claws. Now, where can a gal get a decent cut of fish around here? A short time later, the trio left the tavern. Eris, still perched on Linrem's shoulder, though she was licking her paws contentedly. The old man walked over to the wagon and began pulling out small bundles, carefully laying them into the back of Ravenel's handcart. Eris gave a snort of indignation at all of the motion and leapt clear into the driver's seat, where she promptly curled up. Linram finished loading and motioned for Ravenel to take hold of the cart.
"Don't worry, boy,"
Linram said, reaching down and caressing the wheels, making them smooth and round.
"These products won't do well with all of your shaking and jarring them about. You'll be practicing more on the return trip."
"I'm overjoyed, Master, I assure you," Ravenel said in a flat tone.
"Oh, we'll see about that," Linram said with a twinkle in his eye. "Now come on, we have deliveries to make."
The pair began strolling through town, Linram leading the way and Ravenel pulling the cart to follow. 2 doors down from the tavern, they reached Linram's first customer. The old mage rapped on the door smartly and took a step back, folding his hands behind his back. The door swung open and a very large woman appeared in the frame. "Lynn," she said with a wide smile, "I was wondering when you might be wandering into town."
"Miss Pinzer?"
Linram bowed deeply.
"It is lovely to see you. However, if you recall my last visit, I did tell you I'd be back today."
"Oh, please, Lynn," she said, fluttering her eyelashes. "Call me Sheila."
"I'd rather not,"
Lynn said quietly as he turned back to the cart and produced a tall glass bottle that had a wonderfully bright and cheery gold concoction inside.
"Now, as I told you when you placed the order, I cannot ensnare the senses or bewitch the mind. Love potions are truly fiction, madame. However," he flourished the bottle and held it forward for Miss Pinzer to take. She delicately took the bottle, and Lynn continued. "What you have here is a perfume so delectable and tantalizing that those that smell it will be drawn towards the wearer. Be warned, it is anyone who smells it. The effect doesn't last long, though, so be charming."
"Oh, Lynn," she said with a tittering laugh that Ravenel thought akin to nails on a chalkboard. "You continue to surprise me."
"I assure you," Lynn said slowly, "it is I who is surprised every time you order."
"I have to keep you on your toes," she said with a wicked grin. "Someone must."
"Is that what you call it?" he shot back, raising an eyebrow. "I was under the impression that you were making every effort to beguile the governor into courting you."
"Oh," she purred, eyes twinkling. "You read me like a warning label."
"And yet here we are," Linram replied. "My fee, please, ma'am."
Sheila Pinzer laughed and fished a purse from somewhere just inside her home. Opening the small pouch and producing 3 crisp notes, dark blue, 150 Jill bills. She handed them over to Linram, who quickly counted the bills and went to hand the third back.
300 Jill, Linram said, as we discussed last time.
"Oh, that's for your troubles." Sheila winked and blew a kiss at Linram. "Until next time, Linny boy." Linram shivered. Ravenel did not think it had anything to do with being cold. The pair walked on as the old mage tucked the bills into his own purse, which appeared and disappeared into his voluminous robes. "Master?" Ravenel asked tentatively.
Yes?"
Linram was preoccupied and didn't even look over at Ravenel. "Has Miss Pinzer always been so—" Ravenel searched for the right word. "Desperate?" Linram stopped in his tracks and regarded his pupil sharply.
"Sheila is not desperate. She's very lonely. There's a subtle difference, but it speaks volumes."
"It doesn't seem like much of a difference to me," Ravenel shrugged.
"Get another decade or so under your belt and you'll understand,"
Linram said.
"That is an aspect of life that you must learn on your own. For now,"
Linram began walking again,
"trust that I will not take on such unscrupulous customers, and do not speak ill of them."
Ravenel blushed, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, master."
"I swear, boy,"
Linram said with incredulity.
"you ask the most outrageous questions."
The pair continued in silence, delivering the goods the old mage brought to fulfill the orders of his customers, who ranged from Sheila Pincer to the barber, Phil Ramey, even the astute steam engineer, Zacharias Fons. The last had always been a curiosity for Rabineau. Mr. Fons was an eccentric old man, incredibly pale from never setting foot outside of his workshop, with a shock of blonde hair so blonde it was nearly white. His wide, deep blue eyes peered out from his goggles, making him appear incredibly bug-like to Rabineau. The conversations he had with Linrem were often short and filled with jargon that Rabineau just did not understand. Whenever Rabineau asked about the man, Linrem would shrug.
"He's perhaps the most brilliant steam engineer this world has seen yet," Linrem answered. "Most of his inventions go straight to the capital, as anything that is truly valuable tends to go, so we don't see them much around here. But, as I understand it, he has devised machinery that can traverse terrain faster and more efficiently than our standard donkey, mule, and horse teams."
Rabineau had scoffed. Without the animals, how are they supposed to steer? Linrem had simply shrugged once more.
"I'm sure he has that part figured out. If it's true, it'll change the face of transportation across the empire."
"But aren't you curious to how it works?" Rabineau had asked his master. It was Lin's turn to scoff.
"Hells no. I have my own work to focus on. He dabbles not in wheel magic, so it is not any of my concern."
Rabineau was recalling the conversation to keep himself from asking these questions. His master found so incessant, as the pair finished their rounds and returned to Slippy in the buggy, still parked in front of the tavern where they had been left. Linrem was directing Rabineau in checking everything over and getting resettled for the return journey, when a deep voice hailed him from the road behind them. Jesus fucking Christ, Jeremy. The pair turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man, deeply tanned from what little skin showed under his shiny plate mail armor. He may have had a handsome face in the past, but now it was crisscrossed with ropey scars that covered him from forehead to collarbone, giving him a permanent scowl and an unpleasant aura. The signet of the royal family, a dragon curled around a tower, breathing fire into the air, sat upon his breast like the seal was a part of his person and not just a symbol of his power. Linrem stiffened and scowled when he laid eyes upon the man.
"Dirkly?"
The man gave a cruel half-smile.
"So glad you remember my name this time, Linrem. I'd hate to have to remind you."
Linrem's hands balled into fists.
"What do you want?"
The man laughed, even his mirth dripping with cruelty.
"Straight to the point, as always."
"You should expect nothing less by now,"
Linrem shot back. He nodded, conceded.
"As much as it pleases me to converse with you, I am here on official business."
"My answer remains the same."
Linrem's voice hardened to a diamond-sharp edge.
"There is nothing you or your king can do to say or change my mind."
"I only wish for a moment of your time."
He glanced towards Rabineau.
"In private."
"And this is the quickest ways to get you the hells out of here?"
"Well,"
the man smiled,
"certainly the most civil."
Linrem turned to Rabineau, speaking softly.
"Stay here, watch the buggy, and make sure the boy doesn't do anything stupid."
"What?" Rabineau asked, confused. Linrem blinked, as if seeing Rabineau for the first time.
"I was talking to Eris."
He then spun on his heels and followed the mysterious figure into the tavern once more, leaving Rabineau to sit in the buggy and wonder.